So we're now in week 2. We're going to look at some different options this week in terms of organizing your essay. A couple people have come to me in the past saying that's one of the things that they struggle with. And I'm going to assume that since this essay is longer and involves outside research, that it's probably a little bit extra overwhelming to think about structuring such a lengthy piece. But before we look at that, I wanted to just make sure you guys saw this link, helpful information for your research essay. This is right within the Unit 3 persuasive research. By clicking on that, there's lots of different things that should help you if you get stuck. The first one is a video that's made by one of my friends in the library, and it shows you how to use the databases. So if you're still trying to find research, watch that video, see if that helps. There's links how to find books and ebooks. Don't forget that's one of the source requirement types for this assignment. How to find articles. You also are required to use an academic journal, aka a peer-reviewed journal. And you also need a newspaper or a magazine article. So that's going to show you how to find them. I have a tips for searching link here. You can get writing assistance. I'm sure that's changed. But if you are looking for some help via the Writing Center, let me know and I can contact you in terms of how to set that up. There's a link for evaluating your sources, citing your sources, if you need to request articles from other libraries, how to do that. So make sure that you're clicking throughout this folder if you find those questions are coming up, especially just because I'm finding myself repeating myself with stuff that you should be able to find on your own. But as far as structuring this week, I've included some different options that I think will be particularly helpful. So this is also going to be helpful if you're one of those people who's reached out to me who said they're kind of stuck in terms of garnering enough material for the essay itself. So sometimes it can just kind of help if you know how you want to organize everything. You'll see where there's holes in your argument. You'll see kind of what information is needed, what you have enough of, what kind of holes in argument exist, and if you need more research, things like that. So one of the options I call a they say, I say option. I know it's the same title as that book I talk about, but really it's because that's how you would organize it. You would start with like a popular opposing viewpoint, or maybe you want to offer a rebuttal to a popular article that you read that a lot of people are agreeing with, and you want to counter that in some way. And I think that this option 1 is especially helpful if your topic is very controversial. So if you've chosen something like abortion, where people are very passionately one way or the other, and there's lots of reasons each would give to support their own side, it might be easier just to start right off the bat, kind of disarming your opposition. So if they say is saying, your thesis should not be a law, your thesis should not be enacted everywhere, whatever it is, because you want to kind of present that opposing view and then defend against that. So I gave you an example here in terms of arguing that public school uniforms should be in every public school. So what you could do, and you'll see the way I've kind of tried to make this clear, is in italics you have the opposing viewpoint. In bold, I have a very strong transition that is going to signify to you that you're now switching gears to a contradictory argument, which is your own, and then your counter argument. So in this first paragraph, again, this is going to include, it's really boiled down, but here's the opposing viewpoint, here's where I stand. So look at paragraph 1 here in italics. Again, this is the opposing viewpoint. So opponents to universal public school uniforms argue that a student's creativity and individuality will be stifled. Proponents of this view consider uniforms, quote, creative handcuffs. So that's a nice way to kind of embed what someone has said that you've researched that brought up this opposing viewpoint. There's in-text citation there. In bold, here's that strong transition I talked about. So now the reader understands we're coming away from the opposing viewpoint and we're jumping to focus on how you answer that argument. So To kind of continue with this first paragraph, this first rebuttal, you would say, while it is true that a sense of identity can be formed or reinforced with clothing choices, this sort of identity building is shallow at best. The sort of identity that is hinged on how your outer appearance is presented isn't one that should be touted as a goal for the public school system. With uniforms, students would be forced to use other, more substantial, more authentic measures to form their identity and be better for it. So if you remember from last week, we talked about naysayers, and you want your rebuttal to be thorough. That's kind of what we're looking at. So that paragraph really isn't enough to be an entire paragraph. I'm, again, just boiling it down to give you an example. The naysayer itself may be several sentences, but you want to make sure that yours, first of all, is second, because it's easier to kind of be the last voice that's heard. That in and of itself tends to strengthen your argument, but you want to, again, be thorough in rebutting that argument. So then in paragraph 2, this would be another naysayer. So you're not continuing to talk about this opposing viewpoint that views students' creativity as being under attack. This is another issue that you're either anticipating people having who don't agree with you, or this is in the course of your research something that you've actually encountered. So paragraph 2 could start off again in italics with an opposing viewpoint. It has been said that school uniforms are expensive and are cost prohibitive for some families. In bold, here's a strong contrast transition. However, so here's your rebuttal to that, and again, must be thorough. A recent study found that the average family spends an average $245 every school year on school clothes when the children do not wear school uniforms, while the average cost of a year's worth of school uniforms costs an average of $175. And because that's an exact figure, you have to give the source that you got that from. In this case, the author is Roth, and I got that from page 437. So to continue to rebut against that idea that uniforms are too expensive, it continues. Many schools with uniforms also have programs in place to assist low-income families in affording uniforms. It is also important to note that this discrepancy in a student's family income is made more obvious when more affluent students wear expensive name-brand clothing, while their less wealthy peers can only afford cheaper garments that display their lack of resources. This often leads to bullying. So then you could continue on with either more opposing viewpoints, or maybe you want to expand on your point about bullying, which would be a mix of these different options, which I'll talk about in a minute. But again, you see there's lots of points that contradict this idea that uniforms are expensive, because I assume that they are. I think they're high quality. You can only get them from certain manufacturers. So I'm assuming it's not something, that would be on the shelves at low income stores. But so the first, contradictory point is that actually a lot of people spend more when they have to afford an entire wardrobe. Second, that there's programs to assist low-income families if somebody really can't afford the uniforms. And then also those low-income students are actually under greater chance of being victimized due to their low-income status because of the clear discrepancy in family status via the clothes that you're wearing. So that's one option. They say, I say, you kind of go back and forth. It's like a ping pong game. Option 2 is point building. So this may be helpful if you just have a lot of points and it's not something that's necessarily controversial. Maybe it's something that people aren't typically well versed in. So you're just kind of using this stacking essentially of here's a reason, here's another reason, here's another point, and so on. So continuing with this focus on traditions, you're going to use addition transitions, not as many contrasting transitions. Also another, and so on. So you want to think of each paragraph as being a subsequent point. So if you look at this example, if I'm staying with the same topic of public school uniforms, if your thesis had 3 points, that first, uniforms reduce bullying, they improve test scores, and improve school security, then again, if you remember our discussion about thesis statements, that would dictate which order your paragraphs come in. So paragraph 1, if your first topic sentence looked like this: numerous studies have shown that when the discrepancy between socioeconomic status of students isn't as obvious because of uniforms, bullying is greatly reduced. And it continues on. Paragraph 2, not only are social aspects improved, seen in a reduction of bullying, but academic results are also much improved. So that kind of topic sentence is going to link to the previous point, and it makes it clear that you're just building, and here's a new point, as something else that would benefit the schools and the students themselves. Paragraph 3, for many, especially parents, the improvement in school safety that would result from the implementation of uniforms should weigh heavily, even if reduced bullying and better academic performance aren't enough. So again, you'll see that each of these topic sentences like link with each other, so it's clear as your reader is reading the flow, they know what to expect to come next, and so on. So again, that's just point building. If you choose that, I suggest putting your strongest point last. That tends to be a very effective way to sway your reader. Option 3 is to consider a cause and effect model. So the kind of example here, what does a situation look like now, and what are those negative effects? So if you were building off this bullying idea, if right now most public schools do not have school uniforms, tell us the number of students who are bullied. Tell us the number of low-income students who are victimized. Tell us low test scores. Tell us how long it takes kids to get ready in the morning, all these things. Then here's my solution. So kind of run through what it would look like, how much it would cost, how much it would save, being the positive effects. So that may be a way. It really kind of depends on what your topic is and what points you're going to use to really reinforce your position. And option 4 is really to mix it up, and that's probably the one that most of you are going to find works the best. So if you want to kind of start off with option 1, here let me just kind of go right off in the beginning by refuting some popular opposing viewpoints. Then let me just build point after point of what I still stand in whatever position it is. And here's maybe a wrap-up paragraph or a cause and effect, those kind of things. So just kind of consider all your different options. And like I said, this may be helpful in terms of actually building content for your essay as well. So this week we're doing peer review. So by Wednesday, make sure that you have posted your rough draft. So if you click on peer review, the instructions were there. Create thread. Again, in your subject, I ask you guys to put your name so I can see who is responding to who. And you can type it in the message box. You can also copy and paste it. I don't know what the word limit is though, or you can attach it as well. So whatever you think works better. And then by Sunday, I asked you guys to answer these questions for 2 of your peers. So the way it's going to work in terms of not having groups, because obviously we're at home. So the first 2 people I'll get to in a minute, but everybody else, when you post, you are going to post to the previous 2 people who posted before you. So if you're the 3rd person, you're going to respond to the first 2 people. If you're the fourth person, again, you're just going to look the 2 up. I'm hoping that this is going to help people so that everybody gets feedback instead of people just picking 2, and then usually what's happened is the same kind of 5 people get feedback, which isn't necessarily fair. The exception is if you're the first person to post or you're the second person to post, you guys are just going to have to do the people below you, the people next, the next 2 people. So hopefully that makes sense and you'll get some feedback. I'm going to in the next couple of days get on grading your first paragraphs, giving you some feedback, looking at your discussion board comments, and just kind of checking in as I can. And then we're going to be wrapping up with the final draft next week. And one more thing, I put in your reading as needed. Chapter 17 and 18 has more information in terms of incorporating your sources, avoiding plagiarism, and your works cited and things like that. So your textbook has extra information, but I think we did a good job covering all of that. That's just more as an ad needed basis. So if you have any questions, reach out to me. Don't forget that in the discussion board, there's this Ask the Professor. So ask me questions if you just have questions that you think the rest of the class might benefit from. And this peer connection, I've seen that nobody's posted, which is fine. But just kind of check in on people. Obviously, we've lost that community that we had in the physical classroom, but I think it's important for us to kind of maintain those relationships that we started forming in class. So good luck. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.